Yo, what is up? You have found We Like the Blazers. I am Brandon Goldner, and here, as always, is the effervescent, energetic, absolutely full of just so many rainbows and sunshine. Over here, it's Ryan Whitledge. Ryan, what's up, dude?
Not much. Just enjoying the rain that finally came around. I'm kind of hoping that it stays for a while. Not gonna lie.
We need it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still can't believe that we, like, what was it? I think for the month of March, like Texas had more rain than Oregon did or something like that I thought I saw.
It's not good. And it's not just like you can tell, it's kind of like stats and then the eye test. Like the stats about where our like water and snowpack are right now, it's really, really bad. And the eye test confirms that like it feels like it hasn't rained a lot. Like, and while I think this weather was partially responsible for kite surfing lessons getting canceled today, which is kind of a bummer. When I'm talking to the guy on the phone, he was like, "Oh yeah, like it's usually a lot more consistent by June, but we need the rain, so I'm not complaining." And I think that's how I feel about it. Yeah. We just
it's also weird because like I think for one, just weather talk in general is weird, but.
And yet here we are.
Well, and that's also my sign of that I'm getting old, is because that is now like my icebreaker of conversation. I randomly ran into like three people I had never met out at a bar yesterday, and in each instance I found myself talking weather, and I'm like, I am that old guy.
Yeah, does your knee let you know when a storm's brewing?
At this point in time, it's my entire body. I got 2 bum shoulders, 2 bum knees, and a bad ankle. So,
well, it's funny because, like, yes, and also, what happened last year was so astronomically terrifying that, like, we were locked inside of our houses because it was like chock full of smoke, right? And that could happen again this year, and that would just really suck. So this is a public service announcement. Please be mindful with your fires, and your fireworks. If that's how you choose to celebrate certain stuff, just please be careful because it's going to be dry. So anyway, yeah, it's raining. The AC still doesn't work. It's pretty muggy for Oregon. I had the fans going, had to turn it off for the pod. So as we record today, I am going to be sweating more and more. And you know who else is sweating is like all of Rip City waiting for whether or not CJ McCollum is going to get traded. And so I wanted to start maybe there. Great segment, right? Or great segue.
Professional.
Super professional. I am definitely not slightly sick and like forcing myself to sound like I have energy. But yeah, so, okay, CJ McCollum. So like the biggest thing that the Blazers could do in order to change their fortunes is to, switch out their second best player for somebody else. And the way I wanted to kind of tee this up is under these parameters. So Mike Richmond of the Locked On Blazers podcast did a really, really good job of going through a ton of different CJ trade scenarios. He had emailed different Locked On podcast hosts from around the NBA and said, hey, if you had to trade somebody for CJ McCollum, like what's the highest price that you would give, that you think the team would reasonably give for someone like CJ McCollum? I will spare you all the different names he went through, but there were 3 that stuck out to me. It was a combination of the work he did there and then kind of his own analysis after. The 3 that stuck out to me as being the most realistic, and we can start with any 3 of these, but I wanted to narrow it down. The names that came up were Kristaps Porzingis of the Dallas Mavericks, Tobias Harris of the Philadelphia 76ers, and Chris Middleton of the Milwaukee Bucks. So obviously there could be other trade targets, but when you're talking about somebody who could ostensibly, better fit the strengths and weaknesses of Damian Lillard, those 3 players seem to come up a ton. So I'm going to kick it to you. Why don't you pick one of them and just tell me if you would be up or down? And I know this like draft picks and, other players would be involved, but like basically swapping CJ for any of those 3, do any of them jump out at you? Do you want to talk about any of them, or do you just want to sit there as I continue babbling about nothing and annoying the piss out of everybody who's listening?
Oh, I'm supposed to talk on this thing too? Oh, geez, I didn't know.
Sorry. It was a long setup.
But I don't know. The important thing that I was trying to think about, like, especially in regards of like the possibility of trading CJ or whatnot, it's that for one, we can dream all we want about like, oh, hey, Chris Middleton or Tobias Harris. I'm not even going to reference Kristaps Porzingis because he's just being a whiny little bitch in Dallas right now, and that does not appeal to me in any way, shape, or form. But
somebody on the Blazers was a whiny little something in a different team. Yusuf Nurkic. I mean, he basically whined his way out of Denver. So I mean,
yeah. Well, also, do you want another 7 foot tall guy who has injury history and an attitude problem? I don't think trading CJ. He's a lot more reliable than Kristaps Porzingis is. But so I think you're really like looking at Middleton and Harris, and the big thing with them is that kind of they would provide a more balanced roster. But again, you have to ask what, like, besides just contracts and money and making it work, what would be Milwaukee's incentive to give up Chris Middleton for CJ McCollum? What does CJ McCollum add to their roster? You can't just look at it and go, oh, well, we want him, so we need to trade him for this guy. It doesn't work that way. You need to look around the league and say, okay, so what are teams that are currently in need of a guy who can create his own shot off the dribble, has good handles, and they're lacking in that shooting guard position, or even like kind of like backup point guard or whatnot. Obviously, with Giannis, he would be. It would benefit him, but I mean, Chris Middleton does exactly what CJ would do. The more intriguing one is obviously going to be Tobias Harris out of Philly, but you need them to kind of fall apart here for that to happen, because Ben Simmons handles the ball a lot, not really a shooter. Joel Embiid needs a little more outlet stuff. And while Tobias Harris is a rather up and down player, CJ would be an upgrade for them, but that doesn't mean that Tobias Harris is a downgrade for us. It just more balances out the roster, if that makes sense.
It does. And I would say, so I would actually, let's start with Kristaps, because I think to you and to me and to most people, he's like the least palatable of these three. And just to reiterate what you were saying, and I agree with you that like when you're looking at these trades, you do need to look at the other team and kind of ask yourself, like, what could they do with a player like CJ and his strengths, which are like elite shot making ability, primary ball handler, really good mid-range game. I think CJ actually has more room to grow in the mid-range. I think you could see him at some point in his career becoming elite in the way that Chris Paul is, just abusing that area of the court because he's so good at it. Doesn't really draw fouls, not the best passer, is a poor defender, I think is a fair way to put it. And so then you do need to look at teams who could use a player like that. And I personally think that all three of those teams, the Mavericks, the Bucks, and the 76ers, actually all three of them could fit in a player like CJ relatively easily. And I want to dig into more about what they would really get out of it and if it would actually help them or just kind of in theory. But let's talk about Kristaps really quick, just because he's kind of at the lower end of my list too. So the dude's 25. So he's not super old. He has a long injury history. He was supposed to be, he was brought into Dallas, gave up quite a bit in order for him to be the number 2 behind Luka Doncic. And it's not worked out that way. The box stats say that he's pretty good at 20 points a game, 9 rebounds, a block and change. I mean, he used to be a more dynamic rim protector when he was in New York. And he's lost a little bit of that, whether it's by scheme or by preference or by loss of athleticism. But here's what I would argue, and I want your take on this. So when I think about trading CJ McCollum, I have sort of abandoned the possibility that Neil Olshey can get a 1-for-1 talent, like equal. Like I don't think you can get 1-for-1 talent for CJ anymore. I think CJ's contract at $30+ million for many years, and him being almost 30 years old, I think that ship has sailed. So I have adjusted my expectations to say that if you value the fit next to Dame more than you do just raw talent, then those are the kinds of trades you look at. And I think this is one of them where it's like, okay, well, Kristaps, he's not a small guard who cannot play defense. He's a 7'3", probably plays best at power forward, ? Can protect the rim at times. He's a good, not elite 3-point shooter. I mean, his attempts have gone up the last couple years, but he's still, right around 37%, which is good, not great. can't do anything off the dribble really, and is in a lot of respects can get abused in the post because he has like a high center of gravity, just kind of has like a skinny butt syndrome going on.
Yep.
But he plays a position that, you know, he doesn't duplicate Dame's skills in the same way that CJ does. So even when you look at all of Kristaps Porzingis's flaws, I mean, can you talk yourself into, well, he would be a better fit besides Dame, and therefore it would be worth entertaining this idea? Or are you just totally like, thumbs down, don't do it, bad trade?
Well, the other part of it too is like, it's like I said, again, you got to think about this in that balance perspective. And so as you stated, like he's best as a power forward. Okay. So obviously you're not going to trade, you're not going to trade for him, especially if it would take, you know, CJ and some pieces or whatever, to get Kristaps here. So then you're looking at, okay, you've gotten rid of your shooting guard. Who's going to step into your shooting guard role? You have Dame. Are we assuming that Norm is coming back under these circumstances? Yes, let's say, just for this balance fit.
Yeah, because if he didn't, you would be fucked, right? Like
exactly.
It's like,
yeah, and again, like, and I'll kind of loop back to this here in a smidge after this Kristaps thing, but so you have Dame, Norm. In this case, you're shoving Robert Covington out or to your small forward, and that is not necessarily where he excels and where he's a good player. Like his body type fits the prototypical mold of an older generation small forward, but now you're playing him out of position, and then you're going this Twin Towers route where, yes, Kristaps can play the outside. He is more mobile than Nurk, but now you're taking him away from the rim, and it just, I don't know, just fit wise, I don't see it. And then also, I mean, you have foundational building piece Zach Collins that's probably going to get a prove it deal. You know, does he just strictly slide to the bench in backup roles? I don't know. I can see where the talent, you could go, oh, well, of course. But again, it's, you always got to look at it and how does it all fit together? How do these puzzle pieces make the puzzle have that picture? And the other thing, with when I had mentioned Norm, that is probably, if the Blazers are going to trade CJ, again, I think I've mentioned this before, it is such a delicate balancing act between making a CJ trade and signing Norman Powell. Because if you immediately sign Norman Powell, everybody in the league knows there's the bat signal that CJ's gone probably. And that and if we're talking about like his value is 75 cents on the dollar, be ready for his perceived value to drop down to like 50 cents on the dollar. Well, but if you trade him before signing Norm and Norm doesn't sign, then you're fucked. So there's this weird, delicate balancing act that's got to go on with those transactions. But
actually, you brought up something that we didn't talk about before the show, but let's really hit it really quick. Like the likelihood that Norm Powell re-signed. So actually Nate Duncan and Daniel LaRue of the Dunked On podcast went through the top shooting guards who were available, and it was Norm, Tim Hardaway Jr., and darn it, one more that were kind of like the top three that are on the market. And they went through all the teams who have cap space, who might need somebody like Norm. And like the best fit they could find besides the Blazers was the Toronto Raptors. And like, that's not going to happen. And so they were kind of like, yeah, I mean, like it seems pretty likely he's coming back to Portland because the market's just not going to be there for him, which that was interesting. And that was important, I think, for me to hear, because I hadn't thought through that. So what I'm saying is, if that's true, if it is just because of the market of the NBA is less amenable to picking up a Norm Powell into cap space than maybe I would have assumed, if that's true, then maybe signing Norm isn't the bat signal that you would otherwise think it would be, because maybe then it's not about Norm Powell thinks this is the best place for him because CJ's gone. Norm Powell just thinks, oh, this is the team that literally can give me the most money based on need, right? Like, because there just aren't enough teams to compete for him. So I would just, but you're right. It's like that notwithstanding, you're right. It's a delicate little tricky balance. And then the other thing too is like, what would a starting lineup of Yusuf Nurkic and Kristaps Porzingis look like? That would be super weird. Like, exactly sure. Like, I'm trying to, especially if you're like, oh, like Nurk has more playmaking ability that he could take advantage of. Like, what does the court spacing look like? I guess Kristaps can float to the outside. I don't know. Actually, you know what? Like, I'm starting to talk myself into it. I think it'd be interesting.
No.
Yeah.
Is this your next Kool-Aid? Do I have to slap the glass out of your hand for this one too?
I actually do have a glass of Crystal Light, which is straight out of 1989. But no, like, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I tend to not want to see Porzingis here, basically because two reasons. One, I think that he thinks more highly of himself than he has proven, and he's still young enough to maybe trick himself into thinking he can be a superstar, which I just don't think that's possible. And then the injury history is just it is terrifying because CJ has been like really reliable, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, well then, okay, fine. Is there anything else to say about Kristaps Porzingis before we go on to the other two maybe more desirable targets?
Nothing that I got. I already called him a whiny little bitch, right? I already got that out of the way?
Yes, you already called him a whiny little bitch, yeah.
Then we can move on.
Good, very good. Okay, then let's talk about Tobias Harris, Tobias Funke. He is 28 years old, so he's like a year younger than CJ. I am trying to find his contract. Oh my goodness, does he make a lot of money?
Yes, he does. See, it's one of those things like when you talk about like CJ having a poor value contract, you can look directly at Tobias Harris and go, okay, I don't know what the hell Philly was thinking there, but alrighty then.
Well, okay, to be fair, the contract structure in the NBA is such that people on a max contract, the team is getting way more value than the number on the contract because there's like an artificial ceiling, right? Like, for example, like someone like LeBron James, the amount of value he had to the Los Angeles Lakers, he should be making like $100 million a year, right? And so because of that, you have players who I think, honestly, who are on like very close to max contracts where it's like, well, compared to max players, they're not that good, but I think their true value may actually be closer to that than we would think. But leaving that weird esoteric argument aside, here's the deal. Tobias Harris is making next year $36 million, the year after $38 million, and then in 2023-24, be prepared to pay this dude $40 million. That is a lot of money.
Yeah. After next season, his future guaranteed cash is $76.9 million. And if you want to, if you comparatively, after next year, CJ's guaranteed cash is only $69.1 million.
Nice. But yeah, it's obviously like he's getting paid a lot of money. So then what are you getting? Like, you're getting somebody who's a legit 6'8". He's somebody who can guard multiple positions. He's not like a world-beating defender, but he's more than passable. His fit next to Damian Lillard would be much, much more logical. And so in a vacuum, if you were asking me, as contrasted to the Porzingis thing, if you were to ask me, hey, CJ for Tobias straight up, I'd be like, yes, please. Because I think the fit is just so much better. Now, he's not the playmaker that CJ is by any stretch, so you lose something there. He can operate a little bit in the pick and roll, both as the roll man and as the ball handler, like a little bit. So he can do that. And the biggest thing, again, frankly, he just has size that CJ doesn't have, and I think would be a much more natural fit. So then you go back to what you were saying, like what would the Blazers lineup look like? And then I'll kick it back to you. But in this scenario, it looked like Dame, you're going to re-sign Norman Powell or else you're fucked. So let's just say Norman Powell. Then Tobias Harris. Covington is slotted in his natural 4 position. And then Nurk. That's a nice lineup. I mean, I don't know. I like that.
It's also an expensive lineup.
But who cares,
that
right?
is a damn expensive lineup.
But why does that matter?
If you're gonna suck up, I mean, like if you just want to think about it in that case, like we just looked at his salary for next year, so that would be 35, or let's just say $36 million for Tobias Harris, $39 million for Dame. Let's just assume Norman Powell. Let's give him 20. I mean, what?
I'll give him 16. Again, his market is a little cooler than I thought. 16 to 18. But yeah, okay, fine.
Okay, but yeah. So let's just say 20. Throw out, and in your starting 5, you are already capped out, basically.
Hey, you know what? Like, you have to maximize Dame's prime. Like, I keep saying that. And in my view,
as a sports owner would, Jody Allen, not so much. Again, it's the dollars and cents for her.
But that's the thing. Like, I would argue that the dollars and cents of having Damian Lillard maximized is worth more over time than it is to just, to not do that. And so, yes, the Blazers would be locked into their current roster in a bad way, right? Like, again, like Dame, Norm, Tobias Harris, Robert Covington, Nurk, and then you pay for Zach Collins for him to come back. Simons, he's going to come up at some point. Who am I missing there? Then they would have like a taxpayer mid-level exception and then a biannual exception to fill it out. But that's pretty much what you're left with. Nas Little is under contract. But that's pretty much what you're left with. And so I think this is the bet you're making on something like this, on a trade like this. The bet that you're making is that Philadelphia would want to have somebody like CJ, who's just an elite creator, shot maker, because that's not Ben Simmons. And for as much as Joel Embiid is an MVP candidate, no doubt, I think that in their view, having someone like CJ could really, really help both Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. And again, you're assuming that Philadelphia is going to keep both of those players, which I think that they probably will. So I don't know, like to me, this does make sense. Like the money part of it, I hear what you're saying, but my overwhelming feeling is that Damian Lillard, being as good as he is, you kind of have to do everything to maximize his prime, not just to win, but in order to make money, in order to get gate revenue, in order to be exciting, get the national TV broadcasts, all that going, and also just in order to be competitive in the years after Damian Lillard is past prime. So I don't know, like, what's your feeling on this? Like, just generally, like, would you be excited about this or not excited? Do you think it could happen? Like, what's your thought? I have a couple more thoughts, but I've been rambling.
Some of it to me also too is that like with repeater taxes and all that kind of stuff, like that was part of the reason why we saw them duck so much and not necessarily adding players when they could have or whatever, trying to duck the cap to avoid becoming a repeater. So they do have the ability to absolutely spend every single penny that they can, but then you have to start looking at it and go, okay, but is that sustainable? Are they willing to pay that tax? Go the Golden State route where it's like, hey, their tax bill is basically like just double what their freaking base salary is. Is that bringing back enough value and all that stuff? I don't know. I obviously I'd like to see them go for it. I'm not going to be an idiot and say, no, I care about a billionaire, not, saving money or whatnot. No, I'm an irrational sports fan. Spend all the damn money you want. I mean, hell, she smuggled dinosaur bones in. She can do things.
Well, okay, so maybe this is a conversation for another day, but I as of right now, I firmly believe that it's in Jody Allen's business interests to maximize Damian Lillard's prime in whatever way, shape, or form that you think that means. So that's, again, maybe that's something for another day. I had one more thought on the Tobias Harris stuff. To me, this is of the between Harris and Middleton, I think this is the more likely of the two to happen. I think that with CJ being paid, over $30 million in the remaining years of his contract, and actually I'm pulling up my cap sheet courtesy of the Dunked On podcast. I am an insider subscriber, so they have this like Google sheet that goes through the contract situation of all 30 NBA teams. It's actually really, really useful. But CJ, next year, he's making $30 million. The year after, 33, and then in 2023-24, he's making 35. So as much as that may be a tough pill to swallow, as we were talking about, Tobias Harris makes even more than that. That's what I think makes this deal slightly more likely to happen without having to give up someone like an Anthony Simons or future second round or future first round picks. And I know that Tobias Harris, saying that he's going to be your second best player, is that a championship roster yet? No, probably not. But it does get you closer. And I would just argue that is important. So would he be the second best player on this? I mean, if you bring back Norman Powell, would you immediately say that Tobias Harris is your second best player? Well, I think that you'd have a option 1 and then options 2A, 2B, and 2C between Powell, Harris, and Nurk.
But see, I think that's great because then you're not just so dependent on one or two guys. Real quick, do you completely buy the narrative that it is impossible to win unless you have multiple all-stars?
Okay, this is a bad question for Brandon because I've said it tons of times. Do I actually believe it? No, but with a caveat.
Okay.
The thing is that, like, every NBA champion in recent memory, save for like the smallest handful of them, have had multiple All-Stars. So history would suggest that you need more than one All-Star to win. However, there is a prototype of a team that didn't have any ultra super duper stars, but the fit was so good and they had high enough level players that they won a championship. And to me, that's the Detroit Pistons. I know that was a long time ago. I get that.
That is actually a great reference. I'm glad that you used that because especially if you look at that team, it's the year after they won, all of their roster became all-stars. So I do understand that. Like,
That's interesting.
I do understand that there is, yes, stars win teams. Obviously, the more all-stars you can have on a team, the better your chances are going to be. But it drives me nuts when everyone's like, oh, well, you know, Dame hasn't played with another all-star since LaMarcus Aldridge. You know, Dame is the only all-star on the team. Well, yeah, but on the flip side, say they ran the table this year and freaking got themselves a trophy. You think that helps CJ McCollum's all-star stock for next year?
Yes,
definitely. And that Pistons team is a great example. You look at Rip Hamilton, Chauncey Billups. I think Chauncey Billups' first all-star selection was after that, but it's when teams win, they get more attention and their stars are elevated by that attention of winning.
And also, like, here's my thought.
Wow, how many caveats can you put into one beginning of a sentence?
So many.
But and also, in addition to,
I think of it as like, let's say there are like I'm just making this up as I go, but like 3 different tiers. One tier of NBA team is you have multiple all-stars. Star power wins. In the playoffs, you're playing 41 minutes. Okay, great. Your turn, my turn, or whatever. The second tier is you have players who are at a very high level, and they all fit really well together. The third tier is where the Blazers find themselves now, which is you have one MVP level player-ish, and then you have a second best player who does not fit his strengths and weaknesses, and therefore the other 3 people around him, well, okay, let's say you're going 7 deep in the playoffs. The other 3 starters, 5 players around those 2 players have to be a perfect fucking fit. You have no room for error anymore. And so my point is, okay, if the Blazers are not able to get multiple all-stars, which frankly, I don't think that I think, again, that ship has sailed. I think they can't do it now. Okay, fine. So then you're looking at, we need a better fit. And look at that Pistons team. Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, Rasheed Wallace, Ben Wallace. Who is their 5th player? I don't even remember who it was. Tayshaun Prince.
Yep.
That is a nasty defensive team. And, like, I know it was a different era of basketball, but let's zoom in a little bit further and look at the Blazers' best team that they've had in the Damian Lillard era, 2015. Damian Lillard, Wesley Matthews, Nicola Batum, LaMarcus Aldridge, Robin Lopez. That's also a really good defensive team. The pieces fit well. Yep. And my argument is, it's not really so much about, oh, it's 2 small guards, or, oh, it's like you don't have 2 all-stars. The fit isn't there. And so in my view, I think a player like Tobias Harris or Chris Middleton, the fit, you have more room for error on the other 3 pieces. That's my take.
Yep. And that's the exact thing that I was talking about with, you need to look at everything in the context of balance. If Dame does this, great, but he doesn't do X, Y, or Z as great, or you don't want him necessarily expending the energy on it, you know, you need to pair him with somebody that is like a Wesley Matthews, because Wesley Matthews, like, they're not mimicking. And again, you're just creating a balance, and you want your roster to be balanced. So Dame is going to tip the scales so far one way that you have to try to balance that out by you know, just, again, balance.
It's both positionally and with what your strengths and weaknesses are. And you know who I think would balance this roster out real nice? Chris Middleton. He's 29 years old. He plays for the Bucks. It was looking a lot more likely when the Bucks were down 2-0. Actually, I'm going to type in https://www.espn.com.html.
Start of the third quarter, the Bucks are up by 5. So
no, they're not. Hit the update button, and you were going to be sad as I am, because 5 minutes ago in the third, the Bucks are up by 13 points, which is a bummer.
Kyrie did go down. I haven't seen if he's come back into the game yet.
Did he?
Yeah, he landed. Somebody closed out underneath him, and he landed and rolled his ankle pretty good. But I have not seen yet what his update is.
Okay, that's a bummer. So, yeah. So, I would say that I don't know, like the prospect of Chris Middleton being traded looked more likely when the Bucks were down 2-0. Let me just put it that way in the second round. Because I do think that they, like, if they get to the conference finals and put up a good fight, they're less likely to blow it up. Having said that, let's talk about it. I think of the three people we're talking about, I think Chris Middleton would be the best fit on the Blazers. I also think that despite his large contract, and he also has a contract very similar to Tobias Harris, $35 million this upcoming season, $38 in the next season, and then $40 million in 2023-24. I think that Chris Middleton is the best of these three players. He is the most versatile. He has the most potential, I think, for maybe at times you could have him creating offense on his own. Again, a passable defender, and he's got size and length. I do think that the fit of CJ on the Bucks would be interesting. I do think so. Like, I mean, look at who they have, like Giannis and Drew Holiday. And who else is on their roster?
I literally just closed out their roster.
Okay, by how many points per game they score, it's Giannis, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, and then you've got like Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, Dante DiVincenzo. Like, they could use a CJ, I guess is what I'm saying, right? Like, they could use that, I think. Now, in this case, I think the Blazers would have to give up an Anthony Simons and a future first. Let me ask you this. If the price for Chris Middleton were CJ, Anthony Simons, and a future first-round draft pick, is that a trade that you would make Ryan Olshey?
Yes.
Okay.
In a heartbeat.
So would I. And I think some people would say that's a lot. But you know what? Like, again, like the fit is so much better with Dame. It really does paper over some of the things that Dame doesn't do well. You also could expand a role for Norm Powell. I think that would be great. You could pick up a bargain basement guard, you bring Shabazz Napier home. Like, there's like
the
fact that the Blazers didn't have another ball handler on their roster was, I think, a real big problem. People were calling that out before the season started.
And the one that I love is that Austin Rivers was sitting on the scrap heap. And I said, I don't know how many times, just go sign him. You're going to get him for super cheap. Guess what? Even if you didn't use him at this point in time, you would have kept him off the effing Nuggets. And that looked like it would have been a little helpful.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly it. Like, there are enough guards who can handle the ball where you could get somebody to fill in some of those minutes where you need them. And I think that the top end of your lineups looks a lot better with a Chris Middleton than it does with a CJ McCollum. That's what I feel. That's my opinion. So I don't know. Like,
quick question for you.
Yep.
I'm gonna pivot into this here.
Oh, good God!
Is the ultimate goal of the Trailblazers, is it for the franchise to win a title, or is it to appease Damian Lillard? Quick question on that.
The ultimate goal is to win a title, but in my view, you do that through keeping Dame happy / maximizing his prime.
Okay. And Chris Mannix wrote a really great piece on Sports Illustrated earlier in the week advocating that maybe it's time for the Blazers to trade Dame.
Boo. Boo.
And I know we're seeing all the things online of him in Knicks jerseys and Bulls jerseys and Lakers jerseys.
Oh,
and
man,
whatnot.
The Photoshops are out of control.
Yeah, by the way, those people need raises. They're doing great work.
They're doing really good. They even got like the ripples on the jerseys and the movement.
Those people doing those Photoshops need to get hired by the league to appease team mom so that she stops getting angry every time we get a trade and they don't adjust the player's jersey on their team picture.
Shout out to Tara. Yeah. No, you're right.
But so with Mannix's piece, I'm gonna say I actually kind of agree.
And I'm cutting your mic in 3, 2, 1. Beep.
I think I'd be okay with trading Dame if you could get commensurate. You'd get a lot more pieces back, and I think you'd be able to fill out the roster a lot better and find yourself closer to winning a championship.
But Ryan,
and I'm going to make sure that my address is not posted anywhere online so that nobody comes outside with pitchforks. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be as upset as I thought I originally would when I worked through it in my head.
But Ryan, first of all, you've made the hair stand up on my head straight up. You can see this now. No one else can, but he can.
I can confirm.
I am going full Super Saiyan on this. But Ryan, Damian Lillard, yes or no, is the most talented player that has ever played for this team. Yes or no? No.
Okay. Still putting Clyde up there.
Okay, Ryan, Damian Lillard is close to the most talented player.
Possibly Bill Walton too. I think, yeah. Clyde, Walton.
Okay,
then I'll go.
Look, we're going to omit Bill Walton because unfortunately he couldn't stay healthy. So Damian Lillard is close to the best player in the 40, 50 year history of the franchise. He's close
He's on the Mount Rushmore. Yes.
There is no guarantee that you will find a player this talented in the next 20 years, like between now and when your children are hosting their own Blazers podcast. There is no guarantee you are going to get a better player than Damian Lillard. And Damian Lillard is still in his prime. And he is relatively healthy almost all of the time. And he is an incredible leader. So in my view, it doesn't behoove the team, even if you got more draft picks than you knew what to do with. We've seen how that works out for some teams. Sometimes it works out well, sometimes it doesn't. We see what happened with the Celtics. Worked out okay, I guess. Not really. I mean, the Celtics, I don't know if, unless you really believe in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I'm not sure they're going to be title contenders, even with all the draft picks they hoarded. Look at the 76ers. They're a little bit closer, maybe, but Joel Embiid has injury problems of his own, and if he can't stay healthy, I mean, by the way, Joel Embiid is playing on half of a knee. I don't understand. Like, I feel really bad. I mean, seeing him, like, he has like a partially torn meniscus, and he's playing on it, and every time he lands, he's like wincing, and like, I'm really concerned that Joel Embiid, like, this is the last time we're going to see him be this dominant, because I have a fear that his knee is going to start degenerating, and it's really crappy to say, but hopefully not. But the point is, when you have a player this good, you don't trade them. Not when they're in their prime. And I understand what you're saying. Like, I think it's helpful as a thought exercise. I don't think that we should, like, ignore the possibility, because the fact that he is in his prime, even on his contract, and Damian Lillard is making a ton of money, he could still be traded. Having said that, again, like, especially for this team, I think this is a major 100% flashing red lights. Don't do it. The exception would be if Damian Lillard is demanding a trade, in which case it's out of your hands.
We will never, ever hear that. If that ever happens,
I don't agree.
I think we will never, if he legitimately wants to trade, I do not think that it would be one of those things where we like wake up in the morning and it's, hey, Damian Lillard has been traded. I don't think he'd come out and publicly ask.
I totally disagree. I mean, he's the first player to ever like say, this is the specific coach that I want. No other star player has ever, in my memory, ever done that. And like, maybe somebody can roll the tape and find that's not true, but like, tons of people whose reporting I really respect also were like, yep, like, I've literally never heard anyone ever do this ever. I think Damian Lillard would be more than happy to do that, because we've heard tons of players say that they want out. Like, I don't think that's so unprecedented. Like, I think that is totally within the realm of possibility. But let's go back to this insane notion you have of trading Dame. Make the case. So I'm going to sit here like I'm this big, I want to be open-minded and admit when I'm wrong, and like I listen to other viewpoints and my mind has changed. Do your best to change my mind. Make the case for why it would be a good idea for the Portland Trailblazers to trade the best player in franchise history, in my opinion, and a bona fide MVP candidate in their prime in Damian Lillard. Make the case.
I hate that you put me so much on the spot. I would have written it all down. I don't have like a legit like, hey, look, and you can trade Dame and get X, Y, and Z. To me, again, it just comes back like when I look at the Blazers roster or whatnot, and their salary thing. You have Dame making about 35% of the freaking of cap space with a supermax, and I just think I tend to think about it like, especially like I equate these rosters to they should be built like how NFL teams build their rosters. Like the best opportunity that you have to win a championship in the NFL is when your quarterback is on his rookie deal, because you can spend you have his talent, you have him for cheap, and you can spend all your money on getting the pieces around him better. So in this case, I kind of look at it in just like the contract aspect of that. If you have $40 million to sprinkle out for the rest of this roster, or let's just say, hey, you trade Dame, you get draft picks or a couple pieces back or whatnot, are you able to better balance out the roster? And again, that I just keep bringing it back to that. And like, hey, could you build a roster in which CJ's your best player? Like, is there a way to balance that out a lot better? I think it could happen, but I don't know. It's stupid. It's asinine. I don't have a great argument. I'm just saying I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea.
Well, I don't think it's stupid. I think it's important to think through. So I'm going to just throw out a couple things here. First of all, Damian Lillard is making a lot of money. His extension kicks in next year. It pays him $39 million next year, $42 million the year after, $45 million in 2023-24. Then he has a player option for $48 million in 2024-25, at which point Damian Lillard would be the ripe old age of, I think, 35 or 36. So the end of that contract is terrifying. So there's no doubt about that. And I do see your point where if you have the ability to retool, rebalance, that there's a future in which the Blazers could be better, that because you traded Damian Lillard, you were able to get there, where if you don't trade him, you couldn't get there. I guess this is my point, and I'll let you chew on this. In my view, the balancing the roster thing, it comes with, if you have an MVP level player, then you start there and you balance literally the rest of the roster around that. And if you don't have an MVP level player, that's something else. And I don't know. Let me ask you, do you think that Damian Lillard is a top 5 player in the league?
I always hate this because my immediate gut reaction is to say yes, and then I start listing names, and I'm like, well, crap. Oh wait, and he is definitely a top 10. No question, a top 7. I will say borderline top 5.
And I think that that is probably what I think too. In my view, so you have that piece. He's borderline top 5. Then the other piece you have is that Portland historically doesn't really attract the kinds of free agents that other markets do. It's harder for them to get players. Therefore, you have to put a qualifier, or what's the word that I'm looking for? I can't think of the word I'm looking for. But you have to basically give Portland a demerit for the possibility of ever again getting a player that good.
See, I don't know if that narrative still holds true. I understand that, yes, before it held true when we were trying to woo the likes of freaking Hito Turkoglu and all that crap.
Oh my goodness!
But we always think about it in the context of those eras and that time before. But now we have a completely different landscape in the NBA. Players are their own marketers. You have Twitter's a lot more proficient, and just the example of Damian Lillard and what he's done and the brand he's built for himself in Portland. I mean, I don't know if the narrative of it's hard to get star players to Portland still exists. And the thing is while Dame's here, we can't test it because we don't have the money. Would it still be hard to attract star free agents if you basically had a blank checkbook? Do you think that still would?
Yeah, because what would put Portland above anyone else? I think that if you had, let's say, the summer of 2016, and you had Damian Lillard plus a checkbook. Yes.
I don't think I think 2016 Dame, I don't think he had anywhere near the reach and influence, or had built himself up as much as 2020.
He had a signature Dame. Shoe. He was already signed to Adidas.
Hey, side note, everybody in the NBA gets a freaking signature shoe.
But he has a yes, and he has a top level signature shoe with a top level shoe company. So all respect to CJ McCollum, we're not talking about leaning. All respect to Kawhi Leonard, we're not talking about New Balance. We're talking about Adidas, right? So no, seriously.
The New Balance thing just always cracks me up because Kawhi is such a New Balance guy.
No, it's a perfect fit. I love it.
It's such a dad shoe.
I think it's great. But I guess, yeah, What is it that if two teams, Portland and one other team, had the exact same amount of cap space and you didn't have like a star player, a really amazing leader, what are you pitching them on exactly? Like the ownership, their GM, the city itself? And sorry, I love Portland, but like, I mean, look at it. It's raining. It's the middle of June. It's raining. And we talked about it. Like, thank goodness it is raining. But like, what are you pitching people on? Like, I don't know. Like, I think it still does matter. Maybe to your point, less than it used to, but it still does matter. So I don't know. I think.
And one of the things too, real quick, when you say the city of Portland, were you meaning just the rain, or were you throwing that proverbial like, oh, our city's crap, look at the homelessness and then blah 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 blah?
No, not that, but like Portland.
Because I hate it when people do that, because the players don't effing live in the city of Portland. They live in Westland, they live in Tualatin, and they live in Lake Oswego. And I don't know if you've ever been out there. Those are some rather rich and affluent places. The only time that they actually ever venture into the city is a freaking game day. There are practice facilities in Tualatin. They rarely see the city of Portland.
True, and also, like, if you're closer to, it's convenient for me to go to New York, or convenient for me to go to LA, or to go to Miami, or even to go to Chicago, like, that means more than to go to Portland. Like, and yes, I understand, like, you're on the road a lot, but you still play half your home games here. You're spending more time in your home city than you are others, and Portland just isn't that attractive, and it matters less now than it used to because of the internet. I agree with that. All of this is just to say, I see your point where maybe let me put words in your mouth, and then we can move on to the coaching stuff. But like, basically, you think you would be open to the possibility of trading Damian Lillard if the package were right, and if it like basically gave your future the possibility of being great later. Like, I sort of, if that's what you're saying, I get it. And also, in my personal opinion, I think that having a player as good as Dame means that you just don't trade him unless he asks, like, period. Like, I think you're kind of like, at least until he's out of his prime, and then whatever. Like, I don't know. So I see what you're saying. I don't think it's asinine. I don't think it's stupid. It's just a tough sell for me, but maybe we can dig into it on a different podcast. Any other thoughts on the trading CJ or trading Dame or Middleton or Porzingis or Harris, or how you feel about that?
I'm just enjoying the fact that I've made you say the words trading Damian Lillard a lot.
You have made me so upset. Oh, I hate this so much. Okay, we're going to move on before I get too mad. The other thing that we definitely wanted to hit on was that we have clarification on the Blazers coaching search. We had news, and by the way, I think this is interesting news from Shams Charania of The Athletic, right? That's where he's with.
Yep.
I think that's interesting. We got news from him because we all know that Adrian Wojnarowski is such a big Olshey guy, and I don't remember Shams being in with Olshey or with anyone on the Blazers, really. So I think we should all make a little mental note that this news came from Shams. I don't know if you had an opinion about that, but I just thought it was interesting.
No, it's been, and it's funny too, because every time Jason Quick talks about, stuff dealing with this, he always name drops Shams. Is it Shams or Shams?
I don't know. I say Shams. It could be Shams. I think it's Shams, but
okay.
If I'm wrong, sue me.
But he always name drops Shams and Sam Amick, and I think it's the three of them in tandem, and it's kind of like, hey, feelers throughout the league. So like, Quick is the more local one, but it's then with Shams being as connected as he is, Amick having been around as long as he is, it's kind of like they get together and Quick is like, well, kind of some murmurs of this, and then maybe Shams is like, oh yeah, no, for my source over here, I heard they asked for permission. So I don't necessarily. It's not like the Woj thing where anytime Woj tweets something about the Blazers, we're like, all right, Olshey wrote him that presser. But it is a little more like, hey, they got to spider web their way around the league to get it, but they'll still get the information. So
okay, that's fair. So here is the list, and I'll let you start wherever you want with this, but basically the reporting from Shams said that the Blazers have narrowed their head coaching candidates to the following: Chauncey Billups, who is an assistant with the Clippers, who we have talked about; Becky Hammon, who is the longtime San Antonio Spurs assistant coach under Greg Popovich; Dawn Staley, who is the coach of the University of South Carolina and also the USA Team USA women's coach; Mike D'Antoni, who is an assistant with the Nets. And then Brent Barry, shout out to Oregon State University and former dunk champion Brent Barry, who is an executive with the San Antonio Spurs. So he's in the mix too. So you have Chauncey Billups, Becky Hammond, Don Staley, Mike D'Antoni, and Brent Barry. That's the list. If we were to take this at face value, and I probably would because Shams Charania is very well respected and all that stuff, how do you feel about this list? And is there any one person who jumps out as like, yes, I'd prefer them over someone else?
I feel okay about the list. I'm a little upset at some of the names, mostly because I've been hearkening that everybody needs to stop thinking that Becky Hammond is going to seriously leave the Spurs. And
that's right.
And then it comes out that she is actually going to interview for the Blazers and Orlando Magic head coaching jobs. And I'm like, great. I mean, just to like the basketball gods will spur me. Like she'll be the next head coach just so that the gods can say, haha, you were wrong and make me look like an idiot. I wouldn't be opposed to it. I still think Billups is the number one leading candidate. Mike D'Antoni apparently said that he is extremely interested in the Blazers job. And oh my God, I can't. No, not D'Antoni. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And
Let's start there. Why not? Why not?
I hate him. I've always hated him. I just disdain him.
Did he throw bubble gum at you? What did he do?
He kicked my puppy once. No.
Did he tell you that your beard is not immaculately trimmed? Because Ryan, your beard is immaculately trimmed.
Actually, no, it's not. This thing's scraggly as all get out.
Looks pretty good from here. It must be your filter. Good job.
Yeah. I turned on the pretty filter.
Yes.
But no, and I know people like to say, and I make the joke too, they're like, oh, well, if you didn't like Stotts, Mike D'Antoni is just like, he's Terry Stotts on crack. And, he does coach some respectable defenses and whatnot, but he is also one of those coaches in which he doesn't adjust a lot. And his coaching philosophy is find what you do well and just keep leaning into it. I mean, we don't have to look any farther than that playoff game in which the Rockets missed 26 3-pointers. And it was just, hey, we're just going to keep doing it because that's what we do. Not a lot of adjustment.
A lot of those were open shots. A lot of those, I went back and watched. If you Google, I think it's 27, but like if you Google that, 27 missed threes in a row, a lot of those were good shots, man. Like I wouldn't have taken those back personally. So, okay, so he's stubborn. Let's talk about that. So here's my counterfactual to that, because I've actually come around on the idea of having Mike D'Antoni as the coach, where at first I was like, no, but now I've come around on it. Yes, he is stubborn. He also has a proven track record of empowering his assistants to do their jobs. The biggest example is Jeff Bzdelik, who was the longtime assistant coach with the Rockets under D'Antoni, basically their defensive specialist. And guess what? When the Rockets won 65 games, they were a number one offense, top 6 defense. And they also surrounded James Harden with people who could play defense, which, by the way, hey, Olshey, you should surround Dame with people who can play defense.
No, that's all coaching. It wasn't the roster.
Oh, my God. But that's the thing where it's like, and they were a Chris Paul hamstring away from winning the title that year, I believe. And even with Chris Paul out, like you said, they had to miss 26 threes in a row, basically, to not win that game against the Warriors. They were up 3-2. But anyway, in my view, maybe he is stubborn, but I also appreciate that stubbornness is informed by the people around him. And that is something that, as much as I have praised Terry Stotts for the various ways in which I thought he was a good coach, Terry Stotts never really demonstrated that he would relinquish decision-making or autonomy to his assistants in the same way as Mike D'Antoni has. And I think that is actually really, really important. And so for that reason, he's proven he can have a top defense and a top offense at the same time if he has the right pieces both on roster and on staff. I've come around on D'Antoni a little bit. I'm not saying he's my top pick, but I've come around on it. Thoughts on that?
I agree with everything. I picture him as being able to solve the issues, especially if we're going to take executive car salesman himself, Neil O'Shea, at for his word that the next coach that comes in is going to need to be able to improve the roster without getting new roster pieces, most likely.
Yeah, well, to be fair, O'Shea kind of wavered a little bit on maybe trading CJ. So again,
didn't officially say no for the first time.
Right. No, exactly. And maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think the Blazers can contend if they don't trade CJ anyway. So I think it doesn't matter if you have the best coach in the world. It just won't matter at that point. Okay, so that's D'Antoni. So then you don't like D'Antoni. Who is somebody on that list that you do like?
I still like Billups. I think he's the leading candidate. I think it's his job if he wants it. I know, again, Olshey said that they want somebody with proven coaching ability, and Chauncey has only had 1 year as being an assistant. But I like the idea of somebody like Billups, he's stayed connected. He's played recently enough. He stayed connected enough. He's championship. I the idea of him and his knowledge being able to help a team that, as we look at it now, has, I'm not going to say 2 undersized guards because I don't need Neil Olshey pop out of a bush and yelling at me, but two smaller guards or whatnot. Maybe maximizing their talent, their ability, and whatnot. And he always had great. I don't know. I just trust him, and I'm not as going out and having a flyer on like a first head coach, because again, you look at things like Brad Stevens, like he came from college, nobody expected anything from him. You see things like Nick Nurse. I'm tired of constantly going through the retreads. I'd like seeing more people get more chances. After Billups, then I probably have to go towards Becky Hammond. Because obviously she's been groomed in this Spurs system. There's nobody better to learn or to suck at the coaching teats from than fricking Greg Popovich. So Dawn Staley is next one on the list. As you mentioned, University of South Carolina. She's the USA women's coach down in Puerto Rico now. Actually, Dia Miller of Blazers Edge is down there. She posted a couple photos of her while she's doing some of the shoots of the games. And she's like, am I looking at future Blazers head coach right there? And I'm like, yeah. I wanted to DM her. I'm like, go ask her if she's interested. But I don't know enough about her to make an assumption. Brent Barry, does he have any interest in coaching, like head coaching?
I don't know. And like, let me just, so the good summary, in my view, Brent Barry is last on my list. Like, what coaching experience does he have? Like, I can't use that as my thing of what coaching experience does he have, because then I'm looking at Chauncey Billups. Can't say yay Chauncey, bad Brent. Well, that's what gets me to my next point. My next least favorite would be Chauncey, because like we talked last week about the stuff that happened in his personal life and allegations from when he was with the Celtics. So we don't need to go over that again. Just strictly from coaching, yeah, like this team, I don't think can have somebody who has like no coaching experience basically at all. A year with the Clippers as an assistant doesn't count in my view. So that's my take on it. Like I don't think that would be a smart move. My next choice up from that would probably be Mike D'Antoni. For the opposite reason, is you kind of know what you're getting with Mike D'Antoni. I've come around on him, though, again, because I think if he has the right pieces and you can empower his assistants, I think that's important. My second favorite pick would be Dawn Staley. And that's funny because I didn't know anything about her until her name was floated as a potential coaching candidate. But the reason why I'm interested is you've had a lot of NBA coaches who have come from being successful college coaches to being successful NBA coaches. Now there's also the flip side. You've also had some college coaches who came to the NBA and were not successful, but she has a ton of experience as a head coach going back to the year 2000. So yes, it was in the college ranks, but she's been the leader of a team for 20 years. And I think that really matters. I think that her experience at Team USA also really matters. And I also don't think you could ignore that in 2020, she was named the AP Coach of the Year, the USBWA National Coach of the Year, the Naismith College Coach of the Year, and the WBCA National Coach of the Year. She knows what she's doing. And I think that matters. Now, the one caveat is that Dawn Staley doesn't have NBA experience, and I think that's fair, which brings us to my number one option, which is Becky Hammond. She is a longtime assistant under one of the greatest coaches in NBA history in Greg Popovich. She's a longtime assistant under a franchise which is one of the most stable and successful franchises in my lifetime. She also has she has led teams during Summer League. She has taken over for Pop in spot minutes. I think she was the first woman to actually head coach during an NBA game when Greg Popovich, I think, got ejected is what happened. But that matters less than her years on the bench. And in my view, you're talking about you don't want to retread. you're talking about something that you don't want, like the same old ideas. You get somebody who's a new head coach, but yet has the NBA experience and has been under the tutelage of someone who really knows. So in my view, that is why Becky Hammon would be my favorite in this. And it would be, separate from the fact that I think she's also the most qualified. It would also, yes, it would be awesome to have the first woman head coach in the NBA and for that person to be with the Blazers. That actually would be awesome, and I'd love to see it. So, yeah, I don't know. Like,
talk about the swing of the pendulum. Go from talking about having Damian Lillard endorse Jason Kidd to then if you end up hiring Becky Hammon. Wow, that is as far as that pendulum can swing the other way.
Well, seriously, and look, I think that people's history does matter. Again, we talked about that last week with Jason Kidd and Chauncey Billups. I think that matters, and I also think it matters that when you have people who are supremely qualified, that they get their shot, right? Like, you think about the pipeline of talent into NBA coaching, and it's hard because you don't have a ton of women assistant head coaches in the NBA, which is like the most natural way that you would become a head coach would be to be an assistant head coach. And so we need that pipeline to be stronger. We also need women to get the opportunity, like Dawn Staley, who is like a very successful college coach, to get interviews. That is awesome too. And it's just, it's like, it's a very difficult chicken and egg thing. It's like, you can't get in without the experience, but if you don't have the experience, you can't get in, right? And so everything that the NBA can do to make sure that women are getting opportunities, they should be doing that. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess for me, like, to see this list of coaches, I was actually pretty pleased. I'm more or less happy with it. But that's also, let me ask you this. So those are the coaches on the list. Like, when you go through all of the coaches that are currently in the NBA, would any of these potential candidates make your, top 5 or even top 10 of coaches who are currently coaching in the NBA? Like, do you think like this is a list of coaches who are like supreme, like definitely really, really good NBA head coaches?
I mean, I think it's a solid list. Other names that have been bantied about where that people are trying to keep an eye on is like Mike Budenholzer out in Milwaukee. Again, Woof. I'm just going to say, that one, a lot of people talk about that. I don't fully understand that one because, again, if we're so pissed about the fact that Stotts was late to make adjustments. Mike doesn't make any adjustments, and that's why and if you want to say, oh, well, maybe he can propel the Blazers roster, he has a 2-time MVP, a defensive player, the defensive player of the year, and he hasn't been able to maximize that talent yet in Giannis. So I don't think he's proven that he has the skills to maximize Dame's talent, but no, agreed. I like this coaching list. I'm okay with it if these are the finalists. I try not to put so much emphasis on like, hey, do they have this NBA experience? Do they have, this, that, or the other? Because I mean, look no farther back than Steve Kerr. First time he ever had any sort of coaching job in anything in the NBA, 2014 when he hired for the Warriors.
That's true. I guess my point, and it was a loaded question, and you artfully dodged it. You really should consider a career in politics.
No, I don't need those skeletons coming out. I don't need people digging into my past.
my point with asking was, in my view, there's not a particularly strong coaching crop right now. You don't have, multiple coaches who are proven, who are either, fired for whatever reason or deciding to move on. And I think that, like, we should be mindful that I'm not sure that Olshey really had a plan for firing Stotts behind, I want Chauncey Billups, because that's what it seems like, right? It seems like Olshey really wants Chauncey Billups, and that Dame is okay with it, and therefore that's what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. I think we should all prepare ourselves for that, eventuality is maybe too strong of a word, but is Chauncey Billups like a surefire, like, gonna be a good coach? Like, I don't know. And so I'm actually more excited about some of the coaches around Chauncey Billups in that list than about Chauncey Billups himself, because I just don't know how you evaluate somebody who doesn't have experience doing a thing. I don't know. And I don't think that we can say with the straight face that, like, yeah, like, I don't know. I just, but yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
We could go round and round about it. The part I love too is that, you know, when O'Shea does his press conference and he comes out, and by the way, I mean, I like the fact that we've only dabbled a little bit in it, but that shit was just batshit insane.
That was a wild ride.
Yeah, that was quite the roller coaster. But when he's talking about, like, we're going to do an extensive searches, we're going to take our time, yada, yada,
we
yada,
had
20 to 25
we had
candidates.
70 people.
We had 5 days. Yeah, we had 5 days to whittle down, and here we are, and we already knew most of this list. So
absolute bullshit, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to speculate with this coaching stuff, but we don't know much. There was one other issue, unless you got anything else on coaching that I wanted to touch on, because it's the other big news that set everybody aflame this week, and that is the Blazers moving from NBC Sports Northwest to Root Sports.
Oh yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, you don't have a cable package, right? You do a lot of your stuff streaming wise.
You know, I find the absolute most legal and verifiably acceptable ways of watching the Blazers as anyone possibly could. So no, I don't have cable.
Oh,
yeah, that's right.
From Ryan Green from my other podcast, he has the YouTube TV subscription, and one of the benefits of that has always been that you can share it with up to 5 people. Don't have to be in the same Wi-Fi or anything like that, and three people can watch at the same time. So he's I think it's up to like $75 or something like that for the subscription. But we all kind of like kick in like $20, a month or whatnot to kind of bring it down, and we all get the benefit of it. And YouTube TV, it's now expansive enough. There's over, I think, 80 channels, but Root Sports is not on there. And I think about this move. I understand it because it doubles the viewership base from, like, I think 1.1 million was the reach with when they were on NBC Sports Northwest. To like 2.4 million households they're now into. I get it, but I laugh at it because I'm like, great. The Blazers have now solved the problem of 2014 after every single other person on the planet who cared to watch the game has solved the issue for themselves.
Yep. No, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, I also, like, leaving that piece aside and, like, why can't they well, wait a minute, hold on. I think that I saw something like Root Sports is in negotiations to, like, maybe get on YouTube.
They've been negotiations though for a while. I think now what plays in their favor, because they do have their own streaming app per se, but I think it's on was it Apple TV or something like that, but it doesn't have the world's best reviews for how good that app is or whatnot. But now they have the Kraken, they have the rights to the Kraken, and that'll be starting up. And so then with adding the Blazers, I think this kind of helps their portfolio if they want to go to something like Hulu or YouTube TV and say, look at this and look at what we offer. But at the same point in time, how many channels are we talking about adding? What kind of geofence are you going to put around it? Because Root is that it's Seattle. All this programming is Seattle based, and I think, I hate to give Canzano credit for anything, but he put together a good little piece about talking that now Oregon does not have its own sports media personality for it anymore. There is no, like, Oregon regional, but how are they going to geofence this? How many Root channels are there going to be? Because Mariners games and Kraken games and Blazer games are all going to be on at the same time. You lose all the individual programming and whatnot, but I'm just curious how it'll all look like. But I think, yes, they do have a stronger position to go to these streaming services because of everything they have now. But I don't have confident that it's going to work, because rumor has it they've been trying to get on these streaming services for the past 2-3 years.
I think what you just said, though, they now have the Portland Trailblazers, and I think that matters because the Blazers have more fans than anyone in their package except the Mariners. Well, wait, they have the Seahawks too, right?
No, Root is not a Seahawks package.
Okay, but they have the Mariners, right?
Yes.
So I don't.
Yes, it is. It's Mariners, Timbers. I think they have the Sounders, the Kraken. I want to say they have one of the colleges.
Portland Pickles. Just kidding.
But yeah, and the Blazers.
But to your point, I think having the Blazers, you're right. It gives them a bigger bargaining chip at those negotiation tables. It really does say, now take a look at us. And I think that matters. So, okay, so maybe they get on streaming services, maybe not. But what I did want to take a second to say that, like, I really appreciate the people who work and worked at NBC Sports Northwest, because a lot of them are going to be losing their jobs, and that really sucks. Like, anytime something like this happens, there's a human element of this, and there were so many people who worked incredibly hard all the time. And, you know, some people who maybe I agreed with more than others, but like it is a bummer. And I just want to say that you all, I hope you land on your feet. And I'm sorry that happened, because that sucks and it's totally out of your control.
So I concur with that.
Yeah. So
I was maybe a little bit of an asshole when this news was first being rumored a couple months back. I wasn't necessarily aware that Root didn't offer a lot of its own, like, programming, kind of like how NBC Sports did, in which they, you know, do things like Blazers Outsiders and Talking Ball and Talking Ducks. And so there was a joke or two that I maybe made offhand comments about, like, oh, okay, well, I guess they're just going to be getting new logos on the building. And I know most of the people, much like you, most of the people that work in that building, and I got a couple DMs afterwards, and they're like, dude, no, this happens, we're all effed.
That's totally not your fault. Like, you didn't know, like, what are you going to do about it?
I just figured they'd all move laterally. They'd be like, okay, well, we don't work here anymore. We work here.
And I'm sure there's going to be, like, there will be people who are going to have an opportunity to work with Root, right? Like, they're going to need people who know the Blazers, and those people, a lot of them are with NBC Sports Northwest. So, like, I'm sure that's going to be possible for some of those folks. But all of this, like, for me, I will just say, as somebody who, again, takes advantage of streaming services, like, this affects me not at all. And, like, to me, like, the various blackouts that happen, the fact that I don't have a television, I don't want a cable package, I don't want someone putting a satellite on my house. Like, our place actually has, like, ancient satellites that are now rotting and the cords are swaying in the wind. Like, I don't want any of that. Like, I pay for fiber, I pay for gigabit internet, which is, you know, pretty costly. And I should, as a consumer, I should be able to a la carte pay for, I also want the Blazers on top of that. If you're not going to give people like me an option to do that, then I will find a different way to access the content, and guess what? You will get zero of my dollars. So, good job.
Yep.
So that's how I feel about it. And again, you know, I know it's more complicated than that, but yeah. So to me, personally, for me, I know lots of people are different, but it's not going to affect my viewing experience, thankfully.
Yeah, it's actually the one big thing for me is that I think if they don't end up with something on like YouTube TV, Barely Green is going to cancel his YouTube subscription for that. And me and the wife watch a crap ton or on YouTube TV than anything else. We are still some of the weird people that there are shows that we tune into on basic programming and whatnot on a weekly basis.
You got to catch the newest episode of Project Runway. I know that you are a huge fan.
I really want to make fun of that, but I am also really excited tomorrow for the season finale of Below Deck Yachting. So
I will just say I've talked about it. Like Cassie and I are burning through all the seasons of Project Runway. I think it's a great show. I love it. And they always have someone from Portland. It's crazy. Like we're like on season 8. It's like the third season in a row they've had someone from Portland. They also had someone from Vancouver. So your hometown, or not hometown, but where you live. I just think it's interesting. So
yeah. So
okay.
No, and the wife will be very sad if that goes away, because I don't think we individually are going to pay $75, but maybe I'll find some friends who can split it with. But yeah, either way. Anything else? We got anything else?
I think that's pretty much it, man.
We're trading Dame. Okay.
And we're not trading Dame. God damn it, Ryan. Jesus, got to end on that note. But if you want to make fun of Ryan for wanting to trade Damian Lillard or any of the other opinions that we have shared on today's show, you can always find us at WeLikeTheBlazers.com. Also, check us out on any podcast app. It's just We Like the Blazers. We would appreciate your follow, your subscription, and also on Twitter, you can find us at Like the Blazers. Ryan, where can people find your stuff? Actually, you're not a guest. Why would I do that? Actually, okay, let's do it. All right, you can find me.
They can find my stuff right here.
Oh my God, yeah, exactly. You can find us exactly where we are. That's it. Why do I feel so awkward taking us out? That's it. Great show. I appreciate it. It's raining.
Good job, you.
Good job, you too. It's raining. I think I have a cold or something, so I'm at like 80%. That's it. Appreciate you all. Thank you for listening, and go Blazers, and don't trade Dame.
Go Blazers, trade Dame.
Goddamn.